Hi, and welcome back to this Friday free-for-all edition of Focal Point on AFR Talk. We'll talk about anything that's on your mind to talk about, because that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be all over the lot today. I have no direction. I have no goal. I have no mission other than to talk about stuff that I find interesting, and I'd love to have you kind of respond. I'll talk about a range of things, and I'd love to have you weigh in as we go over this. We are going to get to some stuff on economics and the job numbers. I don't want anybody to lie to you about what those job numbers mean. They're not reason to be encouraged whatsoever, and I'll explain all of that. Here's an interesting story. It's a story from Newsmax about the very first book ever printed in America. The very first book ever printed in America. And I would suggest to you that if you take a look in history and you come across the very first book that a culture or a people or a society prints, it tells you something about the heart and soul of that people. And this book, printed in 1640, is a collection of the Psalms. It was printed in 1640. It could command a price of $10 million or more. It's the whole book of Psalms, faithfully translated into English meter back in 1640. There were hundreds of copies produced. Only 11 are known to survive today. The last time a copy was put up for sale was 1947. So that's an indication to me that the United States has been a devout people from day one. Now, some more instances of the war against Christ in our culture. Here's a soccer coach in New Mexico who was booted from his team. And you know why he was kicked off the team? He was fired as the coach of this team. 3 years ago, this guy was nominated for the National Coach of the Year award. And now he's out of a job as a soccer coach. I think he's still teaching at this school. But he can't coach the soccer team anymore. He was forced to resign, and here is the crime that he committed. You want to ask yourself, did he molest one of his players? Did he do something inappropriate? Did he put a camera in the locker room? Did he show his players pornography? Did he physically assault one of them in anger? Did he use profanity at them? Did he swear at them? Did he go off on one of the parents and assault one of the parents? Now I'm getting worked up. Like I said, I wouldn't be. So you got to ask yourself, what did this guy do to get fired as a soccer coach? You know what this guy did? You know what his crime was for which he was forced to resign? He had the audacity, the chutzpah, to pray for an injured opponent. So soccer, you know, it's supposed to be a non-contact sport, but people run into each other all the time. You know, they talk about getting rid of football because of head injuries. Man, look at what happens in soccer when these people are doing headers and they're both going for the ball at the same time with their heads. They're running into each other full tilt. Anyway, I'm kind of off topic here. But what happened in a match that he was playing, his team was playing another team, and a girl on the other team was injured. She was face down on the soccer field. She was injured. And he didn't force himself into that circumstance. He was known as a believer. So he went over to the injured player and he knelt down beside her and asked her if he could pray for her. And she said she would like that very much. And for that, he has been fired as a soccer coach. Here is a first grader who had written a poem about her grandfather, who was a veteran. And this poem was to be read as part of a Veterans Day celebration. And I don't know who made her take this out. Elementary school, maybe that must have been the principal. It doesn't sound like it's a teacher, maybe the principal. Forced her to take out a line in the poem that referred to her grandfather's belief in God. This was the line that was so offensive. So you think, again, what was so offensive in this poem? Was it pornographic? Was there profanity in here? Why did this poem have to be censored? Here was the line that the school made this first grade student take out of her poem, a poem that she wrote to honor the military service of her grandfather. This is the line. He prayed to God for peace. He prayed to God for strength. And you know what we're getting to right now as a culture? You know, obviously we are straying far from our moorings. I started off this segment talking about the fact that the very first book that was printed in America was a book of Psalms that represents the heartbeat of America. We have been a religious people, a God-worshiping people, a Bible-revering people from day one. It's in our DNA. It's a part of who we are. And now we're at the place where the Bible is treated as if it were pornography. You have to keep it in a brown paper bag, or you got to keep it in a brown wrapper. You got to keep it tucked away. You got to keep it hidden away. Nobody can see it. Nobody can see you looking at it. Nobody can see you leafing through it. Nobody can see you reading it. And if you distribute to somebody else, it'll land on you like a falling safe. Now at Berkeley, UC Berkeley, they're trying to ban the Salvation Army bell ringers because the Salvation Army gladly serves homosexuals, but they do not allow homosexuals to serve in leadership. Now, they don't restrict their services. They don't ask somebody about their sexual orientation before they help them. If it's a human being in need, they're going to serve them in the name of Jesus Christ, but they've got certain standards for their leadership. And these Berkeley students are so enraged at that, you know, and you think about how mindless liberalism is. You know, they're the ones that are always talking about how compassionate they are. And we're the hard-hearted ones. We're the ones that are lacking in compassion. They're the tolerant ones. They're the big-hearted people. They're the compassionate ones. Well, look at this. Here's an organization that exists to help the neediest people in our society. That's why they came in to being. I mean, William Booth, he wanted to snatch people a yard from hell. He wanted to grab them just before they took the plunge. That was his heartbeat. Started in 1844, been doing it ever since. Salvation Army been doing it ever since. But these bigots, these bullies, and these bigots at Berkeley are so determined to engage in this war on Christ and war on Christian standards is they simply don't care if the poor are the ones that get the shaft. Who gets hurt here when the Salvation Army is not able to receive donations from people on campus? It's the poor, it's the hungry, it's the needy, but it matters not to these so compassionate liberals. Now, a piece of good news on the religious liberty front. We've talked about this before, but InterVarsity was tossed off the campus of Tufts, which is virtually an Ivy League university back east, and they were kicked off campus because they believe that their standards of leadership required that their students, the leaderships of their clubs, be devout Christians. Now, anybody can come to their InterVarsity meetings. They don't check sexual orientation cards at the door. Anybody's welcome to come, but the leadership, they believe, should be sincerely devoted followers of Jesus Christ. And the InterVarsity group says, look, if it's an atheist group, then we think that the atheist shouldn't be forced to have an evangelical Christian on their board. We don't think that's right. If it's a Muslim group, Muslim student group, we don't think that they should be forced to have a evangelical Christian on their board. If it's a Jewish student group, we don't think they ought to be forced to have a Bible-believing Christian on their leadership team. But it's only fair and right and just that we have exactly the same liberty to choose leaders that reflect our values. And Tufts has finally given in. They are going to re-recognize the Tufts Christian Fellowship. So that is some good news on the religious liberty front. Now, you might have heard about this. This is a student that resigned from West Point. He was just 6 weeks away from graduation, and he resigned. And he claims that it was all about the religiously saturated environment at West Point. It was Christians here and Christians there and prayers here and prayers there and people sharing their faith with me here and people sharing their faith with me there, and I just had all I could take. And so I had to just quit. Now, it's a real problem for him if you quit because they had 4 years invested in him. He would have owed them I don't know what the total was, something like, gosh, I don't know, $50,000 at least, the cost of a first-class education at West Point. And of course, they take care of room and board and lodging. So this might have been actually several $100,000, and that's kind of the deal. When you sign up at West Point, if you leave early, you got up to 2 years to decide whether you're going to stay. But if you go past 2 years and you stay, then you are on the hook for the whole Megillah. And you're committed not only to finish out the 4 years, but to serve your country in uniform for another X period of time, 4, 6, or 7 years, something like this. Well, this guy dropped out, and he claimed it was all about discriminatory and hostile actions that were directed against him because he is a publicly professed atheist. But I think he just didn't want to be in the military anymore. He wanted out, and he knew that if he just quit, he was going to be on the hook for a couple $100,000. He was going to get a dishonorable discharge. So he made a big deal out of coming out. This was all about religious persecution, all about Christian persecution. And then it turns out that he was actually medically disqualified from West Point and disqualified from receiving a commission in the Army as a second lieutenant, which all of his classmates will receive, because of clinical depression and anxiety. And clinical depression is a pretty serious deal. According to the University Health Services at UC Berkeley, the people that are trying to throw the Salvation Army and their bell ringers off campus, clinical depression is a serious medical illness that negatively affects how you feel, the way you think, and how you act. Individuals with clinical depression are unable to function as they used to. So I think he was looking, how can I pay off this debt? I don't want to stay in the military. I'm clinically depressed. I just want out. I'm going to owe him this boatload of money. And the Army, by the way, gave him an honorable discharge, so he's off the hook for the $240,000 or whatever it is. But he was looking for a way to make a name for himself. He's looking for a meal ticket, and this was it, because Mikey Weinstein, founder of the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, thinks this guy's a hero. He's going to have a career. He's going to make bank while we're going around complaining about religious persecution in the military. Focal Point, AFR Talk. Back in 2.